welcome back to another car rant video. Just kidding. But I do actually have some hot goss for you guys. I'm gonna make a whole video about it, but I'm gonna say for the real ones, the ones who watch like even my reading vlogs, which are like my least viewed videos, I'm gonna tell you guys why I'm in this car, and it's a pretty big deal actually. We're moving, yay! I got a full-time job, so we are leaving Pennsylvania to go to where I will get to teach full-time, which is really exciting. I'm not in the car because we're on the road though. I'm just in the car because we're doing showings on our house, and we had like 2 hours of showings in a row scheduled. So I needed to get out of the house and take these boys with me. So I was like, I may as well go ahead and record this video while I'm in the car. So I got my Starbucks, and yeah, that's why. So stay tuned for, a longer video that will announce to everyone kind of the details of the situation. But today, like I said, this is going to be a reading vlog, and I thought I would do something a little different. In the past, I feel like I just kind of like talk about the details of each book that I read. I kind of like summarize what the book was about, what I liked, what I didn't like, and like, that's fine, but one, I wasn't getting a lot of views, so I thought I'd try something new. And two, I feel like I always end up talking so much longer than I want to about each book. And this year I actually read the most books that I've ever read in a year. Now, I feel like if you've watched any of my other reading vlogs, you know that I am a very slow reader. My reading goal for this year was 20 books, and I met my reading goal. Yay! Is that an ambitious reading goal? No. Well, I guess compared to like, honestly, probably the average American, 20 books, I think most people that I know in real life would be like, that's a lot, wow. But compared to people who would like consider themselves readers or like actual booktubers, obviously 20 books is not a lot. I know some people who read 20 books in a month. But yeah, I've read more books than I ever had before. And I don't want to give you guys like an hour video just of me talking about books. So I found out about Storygraph. I think Storygraph's been like going around for a while. It's not super new, but like I didn't really think, oh, that's something I could do, because again, I'm not like a reading booktuber. But this year I was like, wait, instead of doing it in addition to the reading vlogs that nobody watches, I'll just replace the one with a Storygraph kind of video where I talk about the statistics of the book that I read this year. In fact, I'm going to see if I can find it, but I really was particularly inspired by this person who I've never watched any of her videos before, so I can't remember her username. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty cool idea, and I was like, I don't have to do it in addition to a regular reading vlog. I'm going to do it instead of a regular reading vlog, and maybe it'll be a little bit more interesting for you guys too. By the way, my Storygraph isn't entirely representative of the books that I read, because I literally plugged all this information in like the last week of December. So, when I started and finished each book isn't exactly accurate, but really I just wanted to get all the information in so that it could calculate for me, like what genre each book was and that sort of stuff. Okay, so up first, so it says I read, it's actually like really sad compared to like other people's stats. I read 20 books, 6,859 pages. Woo! That means the average book I read, yeah, that sounds about right. I'm a big like 300 to 400 kind of range person. I've read some really good books that are longer than that, but normally if I get longer than like 500, I don't know, I'm just such a slow reader. I lose interest just because I've been reading the same book for so long, you know what I mean? And then shorter books are fine, but it's hard. I think a lot of people experience this. If you read a book that's too short, it's hard to get like gripped by it. Let's see, my moods. The biggest mood of 2021. I'm going to go through some of the largest sections of moods on this chart, and then I'm going to go back and kind of like see which books, because I know that you can click on the sections and it tells you like which books fall under those categories. The biggest section is reflective, then adventurous, which really surprises me. I don't feel like I read adventurous books, but I did read 2 Percy Jackson books, so I guess like those fall under adventure. Challenging, okay, I can see that. Informative. I did read more nonfiction this year, I think, than normal. So that's not super surprising. Emotional, and then it gets kind of smaller from there. Okay, but yeah, let's look into like what books were reflective. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I'm pretty sure I read Becoming by Michelle Obama, and like that feels very reflective, right? It's an autobiography. Hood feminism. I know I said that I don't plan to like go into detail about each of these books, but probably if something stands out to me, I might go into a little bit more detail. Hood feminism, basically a book about intersectional feminism and how feminism kind of like centers white, straight, cis women mostly. And yeah, that was a good one. My mom said something along the lines of like, it's a good book, but it was a lot of stuff that she kind of already knew. And I wound up feeling pretty much the same way. There were some things that I learned, but in general, this feels like a really good book if you're just getting into kind of the idea of intersectional feminism and starting to think about how race intersects with feminism. But if you've already read other books kind of around that topic, it's not like anything groundbreaking for you. It's still a really good book. It's just, it depends on where you are in your journey if it's going to be like particularly captivating for you. Also reflective, the story we find ourselves in, which is the second story in the New Kind of Christian series. My dad was a preacher when I was growing up. I'm a Christian. And I actually read 2 religious books this year. Let's see if the other one's on here too. Yeah, What We Talk About When We Talk About God. So these are both, I would say, a little bit more left-leaning Christian books, which I really appreciate. I feel like right now our society kind of acts like there are Christian conservatives and then atheist liberals. And as someone who kind of falls in the middle in terms of that sort of stuff, it really helps me to occasionally read these books that kind of remind me that it doesn't have to be that black and white. The story we find ourselves in really focuses on, I mean, it's very, I want to say it was written in like 2002. Yeah, 2003. Oh, this is so convenient. So it focuses on, you know, a lot of stuff that was really cutting edge for Christians in like 2003, like evolution. And the other big theme that I remember it focusing on is like, why do bad things happen to good people? So like there's a main character who very early on it's established that she has cancer and doesn't seem to have much time left to live. They address the 9/11 attacks, pretty heavy topics. And I would say there were definitely some really good moments in there for me. I personally liked the other religious book that I read this year more. What We Talk About When We Talk About God was just really good. It was more like just kind of these conceptual ideas about like how God created the universe and how that doesn't necessarily conflict with the Big Bang, and also evolution, just kind of like how the universe works and how it relates to God. And it was kind of just affirming things that I believe. Having someone else say on paper, like in a published book, like, yeah, I believe that too. I was like, it was really powerful for me. So what else is under here? Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness, which I will admit I didn't like that much. I personally don't love celebrity memoirs because I just don't care about celebrities that much. I just don't care about celebrities. I'm like so hipster, like whatever. But unless it's like someone from YouTube that I have like a very extreme parasocial relationship with, I guess I don't have that strong parasocial relationships with like big name celebrities. But the other thing about Jonathan Van Ness, they have a really interesting story. They were bullied a lot as a kid. You know, I think everyone's probably seen like a picture of Jonathan Van Ness at the very least. Like if you haven't watched Queer Eye, you've probably seen them in memes. So like, you know that they really play with gender, right? I learned that when they were young, they were like pretty overweight, but like very into gymnastics. So like they got made fun of for that, obviously, for like aspiring to be like Christy Yamaguchi or like Michelle Kwan, but like being pretty chubby. They went through some like seriously intense, like kind of like drug stuff, HIV stuff in their young adult days. So I liked their story, but I just don't love their writing because obviously when you like, if you watch Queer Eye and you've heard Jonathan talk, they talk in a very animated way, and that's fine. It's so fun when you're watching someone talk, but they write exactly the way that they talk, which makes it hard to read sometimes, because when you talk, you have lots and lots of run-on sentences, right? And it gets really confusing when you're reading. So I had to read so many sentences, like, over and over again, because I just couldn't figure out what they were trying to say. It's like, do I like their authorial voice? Like, kind of, but it just doesn't translate to paper very well. Overall, really interesting story, but I just don't like their writing style that much. Also, under Reflective, Becoming by Michelle Obama. Now, I did really like Becoming. I think that the reason that I like political autobiographies more than celebrity memoirs is because, well, I don't know. I guess because I'm a pretentious jerk. But I think in general, I look at a celebrity and I go, oh yeah, they're rich. They're probably just like born into celebrity. So I like don't wonder about it a lot, even though that assumption is clearly wrong in a lot of situations. But with a politician, like I already had an inkling that like the Obamas came from, like they really are like a pretty good rags to riches story. So I knew going into that I was going to be a little bit more interested in how she got where she is today. She does go a little bit over the details of like her childhood and stuff, but at least I would say, if I recall correctly, about half the book is spent on, you know, kind of like her life as the First Lady. And I think that makes perfect sense because that's how we know her. She was only the First Lady for like 8 years, right? So if it had been like proportional, I think I might have felt like I wish I could have gotten more of that. And yeah, again, just like she has a really interesting story, you know, being discriminated against when she was in school. Man, the stuff with her dad is kind of heartbreaking. You know, the positives and negatives of being the First Lady, I think it was really, really interesting. And not too, like, ranty either. Like, she didn't really get on a political soapbox too much. I mean, like, obviously, she probably assumed that most people reading the book are fairly liberal, and sometimes she worded things in a way that would appeal to that crowd more. But I wouldn't say that it didn't feel like she was ranting to me. It really felt like she was just talking about her life. Brave New World. Yeah, I can see how that's reflective. A couple friends and I read this together. They kind of decided that they wanted to read it, and then they were like, oh, hey, Becca, do you want to read this with us? And I was like, sure. I, like, always want to read more classics, but it's hard for me to feel motivated to do so. But okay, I haven't read a classic since I was, like, in high school, honestly. So I think part of it is just that I'm older. But this is, like, the most I have enjoyed a classic. I think it's partially that I'm older and also that it's sci-fi. And we'll get more into that when we talk about genres. Oh, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. I guess I can see how that counts as reflective. This is a book that I got for Christmas. I love you, Mom. But I think my mom just, like, knows that I like YA books, and she knows that I care about, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement and race issues and that kind of thing. So I think she saw this book and was like, yeah, that's something that my daughter would like. I would say, earlier I mentioned that hood feminism was a little bit like, okay, this is good points, but I already know these things. I'm Not Dying With You Tonight was that, like, times 10. It was just kind of like, oh, yeah, Becky's privilege. Her name isn't actually Becky, but the Black character does call her Becky quite a lot. And I'm like, yeah, Becky's privileged. Like, I know I'm privileged. Like, I want books that are going to tell me, like, what to do about that. I guess I'm just saying I'm past the point of needing my eyes to be opened. My eyes are opened, and now I'm ready for the next step of, like, kind of figuring out what to do with that privilege. It's essentially a book about two girls, one black, one white. They kind of wind up in a situation where there's some police violence and they're trying to get back to their homes, and they're, you know, kind of walking through this town together and seeing different aspects of the town. The white girl is basically like having her eyes open to the privilege that she has, and that's essentially the whole book. And again, like, 16-year-old white girl could get a lot out of this. But it wasn't anything particularly groundbreaking for me. A book that was nice and groundbreaking for me, Linguistic Justice, Black Language, Literacy, Identity, and Pedagogy. So yeah, this Black linguist, I believe I want to say Dr. April Baker Bell, sits in on and teaches a class in an inner city school. I can't remember the name of the school. No, predominantly black class. I think all black students. Basically, she hears and recounts in this book, obviously, their stories about, you know, what they've been told about their own language, right? African American English, what's right and what's wrong, and, you know, how it feels to be told that the way that you talk when you go home is wrong. Something that I've never had to deal with as a white person. Also, this is what was really eye-opening for me, is she shows some activities that she used to encourage and build up the use of African American English. basically showing the students, like, it's okay to talk this way. We're going to use it in this classroom, and there's literally nothing wrong with it. Like, there is a grammar to this language that you guys use, just like there's a grammar to white mainstream English. That was another big thing that stuck with me, the phrase white mainstream English, because I hate standard English. It's kind of this thing that, like, doesn't really exist. I like the phrase white mainstream English because it shows that, you know, even though I say gonna, and I, you know, use the subjunctive incorrectly, right? It's grammatically incorrect, but no one bats an eyelash if a white person says gonna. So I think it's a really good point that, like, there's standard English, which is grammatically correct, and then there's white mainstream English, which has a lot of mistakes in it, but no one has a problem with it, right? What's up with that? Again, there were things in here that I already know because I'm a linguist and this is like what I study, but wow, definitely lots of new information. And as someone who teaches English, she really, really inspired me to take some of this stuff and apply it in my own language classroom to sort of destigmatize marginalized varieties of English. And that's actually kind of like, that's a big thing that I'm working on right now. But she was a big inspiration for that. Also reflective, I don't know if I would consider Because Internet reflective. Let's come back to that one. I really liked Because Internet. I wouldn't consider it reflective. Dig by A.S. King. Really, really good book. Probably my favorite book of the year. I can't believe I've been recording for 40 minutes. I distinctly remember, yes, it was 400 pages, which is a little long for me. And I remember I read through it in like 2 weeks. Now, it was a library book, so I had that motivation of I don't want to have to renew it. But I also it was not hard to read through. It also has kind of like these short sections between most of the chapters that have maybe like a little poem or something that's really quick to read through. So the blurbs that I read are like, you know, this says, King's narrative concerns are racism, patriarchy, colonialism, white privilege. I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting and like something that I, again, am like really interested in learning about. I wouldn't say that this felt too much like it was focused on racism and white privilege. I do feel like it was focused on how crappy stuff can get passed down generationally. If some grandparents are garbage, it's gonna really impact the grandkids, right? That's kind of what it's focused on. And I guess it's kind of like a metaphor for race, but it wasn't nearly like as, you know, when everything you read is like, oh yeah, this is about white privilege, I expected it to be a little more straightforward, but I liked it. Basically, the grandparents are like potato farmers. They sit atop $1 million bank account, wealth they've refused to pass on to their adult children. So basically, like, these grandparents are really, really wealthy, and the grandchildren, again, they're like estranged. So like there's so much family drama, and over the years, like, some of the grandchildren are like super duper poor, others are like relatively wealthy, but the way it's written is so, so interesting. I distinctly remember that on my genres, it was filtered under magical realism, which I was like, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call out Lindsay Reeds. I'm pretty sure, Lindsay, that you have said that you don't like magical realism. And I take that as a personal attack because I love magical realism. And I was reading Dig, which Lindsay mentioned that she loves. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, this is literally magical realism. There's this weird stuff going on. People like freaking like crawling through tunnels that aren't really there. Like this girl kind of like teleports, if I recall correctly. Like there's just some weird superpower stuff going on, but people act like it's normal. Like, that is the definition of magical realism. Anyway, I loved it. I liked the writing style. I felt like the teenagers were written relatively like teenagers. And yeah, it was good. And the last reflective book that I have is Do You See What I Mean? Plains Indian Sign Talk and the Embodiment of Action. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I know that, like, most of you guys probably aren't going to be interested in this. But I got it for $2 at the bookstore that I used to work at when it went on sale. And I was like, I'm a linguist. I think that sounds really interesting. And it was really interesting. It's about how before colonization, and even to some degree during and after colonization, Native Americans kind of in the western part of the U.S., all throughout like many different tribes had, and again have to a degree, this Plains sign talk, which is like sign language that transcended the spoken language barrier. It was a lingua franca. in other words. And I mean, that alone is fascinating. This author goes into the details of PST and how it works and like the ways that it works very differently from like American Sign Language and other signed languages. She talks about how signed languages are oppressed, how Native American languages are oppressed, you know, how erasing someone's language can impact their community, like just all these really, really interesting themes if you're into linguistics. And to take a phrase from Baker Bell, linguistic justice. It's very nonfiction, very textbooky. So I would say the writing style wasn't particularly captivating, but the information that she shared was very, very interesting to me. Okay, what else do I have in here? Adventurous. What was adventurous? Oh, Catfishing on CatNet. Yes, this was recommended by Angela from Literature Science Alliance. It is a sci-fi book about a girl who uses this online social media site and makes some friends on there. It is revealed fairly early on that one of the friends is an AI. He's like kind of OP and sometimes uses his AI powers in a way that is, people are like, you can't do that. And he's like, yeah, I can. I'm an AI. I can do whatever I want. And they're like, no, but you can't. It's bad. It's wrong. That's interesting. One of the tags on here is LGBTQIA+. This is not, I would not consider this an LGBT book. It's not like, look, they're gay, wow! But like, yeah, there's a lot of LGBT characters, and I think the representation is really, really nice. Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate what Angela always says. It's a nice, wholesome group of teens, just kind of like having a good time and taking on, what happens? They have to like go fight this evil grown-up. You know, it's like a typical dystopian thing, but I can't remember what the evil grown-up is doing. Oh yeah! The main character lives with her mom because her dad is dangerous. Right, now I remember. She wants to find out who he is so she can stay away, but her mom won't even tell her, like, oh yeah, your dad's name is like Paul or something, like stay away from him, you know? And Steph, the main character, is like, but I like want to know about him. I won't like go directly towards him, but I want to know about him, you know? So she kind of like works with her friends to find out more information about that whole mystery. It's a pretty interesting book. I will say, like, Angela really, really built this up for me, and I thought I was going to like it more than I did. I enjoyed it, but two things. One, I feel like the writing was just a little bit corny sometimes. Sometimes it felt like forced. I guess it was another example of like teenagers talking not exactly how I feel like teenagers talk. In general, it was fine, but there were definitely some moments. And two, I cannot believe this book is published in 2019. It's like, it's supposed to be a near future book, but it feels like uglies. Just sometimes the tech is like, how was this written in 2019 and this is a near future book? Overall, really, really good. I liked it, and I'm definitely going to read the next one eventually, but like, I don't feel that, like, I thought I was going to be like, I have to read the next one now! And it was just like, it was okay. I read Mark of Athena and House of Hades. Those both, of course, are grouped under adventurous. I'm going to do a whole video about the Percy Jackson series, so I'm actually going to save my thoughts for that video to save time on this video. Ooh, The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. That was a really good one, and I can see how that's adventurous, definitely. This is, yeah, also sorted into magical realism, fiction, fantasy, science fiction. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to explain. It's basically a story about 5 people are becoming the city of New York. That's pretty much it. Like, each person is like a borough. I will say, I don't know, I have a love-hate relationship with the way the names worked. Because, like, you have Manhattan, who goes by Manny, Bronca, who is the Bronx. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of like silly that their names just happen to match the boroughs that they're in. But at the same time, I thought it was cute and creative. But I love that Staten Island is like supposed to kind of represent like privileged white people. And then the girl who is Staten Island is named Island, like Aislyn, which is just like, it's a very white name. I'm like, okay, good job, you got that one. As the city, they have to fight this evil woman who kind of is like the embodiment of gentrification, and they get help from other cities, which are normally just one person. But because New York is so big and has these boroughs, it's been like split into 5 people, so they have to work together, which is something that hasn't really happened before. It's a really weird concept, but man, is it fun. And again, like a very diverse cast of characters, but also like the representation isn't like, it's not their whole character trait, but at the same time, it's not just there and then ignored. It's a part of them. It's not like the focus of the story to the point where it feels like it's preaching to you, but like it is a part of them. You know what I mean? Overall, really, really good. I enjoyed it, and I wound up actually getting it as a gift for one of my friends because I liked it so much. I was like, this was like my favorite book that I read this year, so here, it's a gift. Also under adventure, Beneath the Sugar Sky, loving the Wayward Children series. I really, really liked this one. This one is focused on a character that I don't think we've met before, and if we have, she was more of a background character. Crap, I can't remember her name. The synopsis doesn't say the name of the character that it mostly takes place from the perspective of, but there's this mermaid girl, and she's plus size, which I think is really great. She's like an awesome plus size athletic girl, like, so I feel like that's something that's underrepresented. It's not like her whole story arc is about like coming to terms with her bigness, because she, like, I think she has embraced it. But sure, she like reflects on it occasionally, and it's mentioned just as like part of who she is. And I thought that was done very well. And the plot of this one is basically there's kind of a time loop thing going on. A girl is trying to find her mother who is dead, and because of this time loop, the girl is like not supposed to be alive. So kind of like Back to the Future style, she's like slowly disappearing, and they basically like have to find her mother and bring her back to life so that the younger girl can live. It's really, really interesting. Again, kind of weird, very fantasy. I love the Wayward Children series. I also read 2 Star Trek books for Christmas. Also, I got some Star Trek books from my brother because I like Star Trek, and I thought it would be cool to read the novels. They're soft canon, okay? The first one that I read was Immortal Coil, which focuses on Data. If you know anything about Star Trek, Data is an android character. He's awesome. He's like one of my favorite characters. Yeah, investigating the mysterious destruction of a new android created by Starfleet. So there's kind of this mystery going on, like why was it destroyed? Who destroyed it? Typical. Bear, no one asked you, okay? But then it's also mostly taking place from Data's perspective. So throughout the book, there's a lot of Data kind of reflecting on humanity, what it means to be alive, what it means to be an android, how those things intersect and don't intersect. I will say I think my least favorite part is that there's like a pretty big romantic plot line, and I don't like the whole Data experiences attraction to people and that makes him human and alive, because that's just not the human experience for everyone, I guess. But again, like, this was written in like 2002, so like I can't expect a romantic representation in 2002. But like overall, the plot was good. I love Data. I thought it was good. And the other Star Trek book that I read was Gods of Night, which is the first in a trilogy that focuses on like Ezri Dax, William Riker, Picard, Deanna Troi is there, Worf's in there, like all your favorite characters are there, but there also are some new characters that David Mack has made for the series. And I actually really, really like the new characters. I think I even like them more than the characters that we know and love, because there is something about reading a text about a show that you watch. It just feels like, oh gosh, I'm reading like a fan fiction that's been printed on paper. So there's that element. But also, I just really like the characters of, like, basically there's this entire crew of, like, mostly women, in, like, pretty solid positions of power. And yeah, I like this crew of, like, mostly women, not just because they're mostly women, but I just think that they're really interesting characters. There's a couple different plots going on, and I might be mixing it up a little bit with the second book, which I have started. But in my opinion, the most interesting plot line is they kind of get stranded on this planet that has a very, very, like, almost godlike race of aliens. And this alien race is very protective of themselves. They don't want anyone getting in or out of their planet, but because, I can't remember exactly how they wound up on the planet, But now that they're there, the aliens are not going to let them leave. They're like, if you leave, people will know we're here and they're going to attack us, and because we're so powerful, we like can't let anyone know we exist. So they're basically like being held hostage by these aliens, and the aliens are like, we're not holding you hostage. Look, stay in one of our nice hotels for free. We're treating you like so nicely. And it's like, yeah, but we want to see our families. It's a pretty intense situation of like, how do we get out of here? Yeah, pretty good overall. I enjoyed it. And the other adventurous book that I read was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I feel like people have been, talking about this on YouTube for a while. I've definitely heard of it before. And one day it was just like in the little free library that's a few blocks away from my house. And I was like, okay. So I put one of my own books in, took this one out, and I really liked it. Basically, this teenager, his grandpa dies, and he's always known that his grandpa was a little weird. He was like hiding something. He has these really, really interesting photographs of peculiar children. Like, I don't know, a kid who can contort his body like a pretzel, or a girl whose head is floating off, or like something like that. The author, Ransom Riggs, basically found these vintage photos where someone has made it look like they have elephant feet or something by using double exposure and things like that. In the book, of course, it's supposed to be like that's what the kids actually are like. So he's like, why does my grandpa have all these pictures of these weird kids from when he was younger? Was my grandpa possibly a weird kid? So the main character goes to the town where the grandpa grew up. He kind of like crosses through this tunnel. And when you cross through it, you kind of get transported back into this time loop. Basically, the peculiar children are living in this time loop, Groundhog Day style, living the same day for the rest of their lives, never aging. And they have to, kind of hide from the outside world. And of course, as always, there's like a bigger conflict. There are like these evil monsters that want to kill the peculiar children, sort of thing. Very fantastical, a little creepy. I read it around Halloween, and it's a really good, like, if you don't want like horror around Halloween, it's a good kind of mildly spooky read. What else? I had challenging reads. The City We Became is challenging. I mean, I guess because like it addresses like race and gentrification and social sort of stuff. Hood feminism, again, like I said, not particularly challenging by my standards, but if you're just starting to think about intersectional feminism, I can see how it would be challenging. Story we find ourselves in, definitely I can see that being challenging. Linguistic Justice, I would say that challenged me to think about how I can really modify my teaching. Because internet, again, challenging? I don't know. Like, I just thought Because Internet was fun. So, okay, I'll go ahead and talk about Because Internet. Because Internet is by internet linguist Gretchen McCulloch. I think it's Gretchen McCulloch. She talks about the linguistics of the internet, basically. She talks about how emojis are used, how a period can make a text seem mean. Why do older people use ellipses so much? Memes. I learned a lot about the history of memes. I would not consider this book to be challenging or reflective. I don't feel like I was like reflecting on bigger themes or anything. I just feel like I learned cool stuff about language and the internet, which is not a problem. I just think that the way it's sorted on Storygraph is a little bit weird. But like, dude, I loved Because Internet, and I talk about it all the time still. Like, whenever people talk about like, why do older people use ellipses? I'm like, I know why! Even if you're not into linguistics, I feel like you could really enjoy Because Internet if you like internet culture. Dig, I can see how Dig would be challenging. Do you see what I mean? I would say it's probably the most challenging book that I read in terms of like actual difficulty, because again, it's written in a very nonfiction way. She's more of like a sociologist too and not a linguist, so sometimes she would use these sociology terms that I'm like, I do not know what you're saying. Informative is probably going to be plain sign talk. Hood feminism, okay, yeah. Story we find ourselves in, Linguistic Justice. I'll finish with moods soon, but emotional, I'm just curious. Over the top, I can see how that would be emotional. Becoming, definitely. I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. Oh, Meet Cute Diary. Yeah, I can see that. And Dig. Yeah, so we'll come back to Meet Cute Diary in a minute. Let's move on to pace. Let's see. So for pace, 50% of the books that I read were medium paced. Interesting. And then 20% were slow and 30% were fast. So it feels like I have a pretty even split. Like, it doesn't look like I really prefer fast or slow. The other thing is, I don't know, like, the way it defines slow and fast-paced. I mean, the story we find ourselves in, I can agree with that being slow-paced. It's very short. but because it's short, you can read it pretty slowly. Same with what we talk about when we talk about God. Then like fast-paced. Let's see if I agree with these. Okay, yeah, I agree with all of those except for Over the Top. Again, their writing style was just not for me, so it was hard for me to get through. Even I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. Like, I remember I said that I didn't enjoy that one too much, but it was fast-paced. Like, the action did make me want to keep coming back and reading it. Page number. Yeah, I read 45%, less than 300. Wow, I didn't realize I read so many short books. 45%, 300 to 499, and 10%, 500 pages or more. What were my long books? Oh, just both Percy Jackson books. Those don't feel particularly long because they're middle grade. Like I said, I did read more nonfiction than normal, I would say. 65% fiction and 35% nonfiction. Normally, I would say it feels like in general, I normally do more like a 25% nonfiction. I just feel like I read one or two more nonfiction than normal. I'm still a big fiction person, but to me, 35% nonfiction that's quite a lot. Okay, now we're into genres. So my biggest genre was young adult. It looks like I read 7 young adult, not surprising at all. Science fiction and fantasy were after that. I'm actually like really surprised because I don't feel like I'm a fantasy person. But, like, when you count Percy Jackson, The City We Became, Beneath the Sugar Sky, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, like, yeah, okay, yeah. I'm trying to get more into fantasy, especially because of Angela from Literature Science Alliance, because I know I like science fiction, and there's a lot of crossover. So that's something that I'm trying to get more into. I read 3 LGBTQ books, Catfishing on CatNet. Like I said, there are LGBTQ characters, but I wouldn't consider it any more of a queer book than I would consider The City We Became a queer book. Over the Top, I can definitely understand that being categorized that way. And now here's where I want to talk about Meet Cute Diary. I think I found out about it through Audrey from Perpetual Pages. They are a non-binary Latinx YouTuber, and, you know, they recommended this. Not necessarily they even recommended, but I think it was just on their TBR. But they mentioned this book, Meet Cute Diary, that's about a trans triracial guy. I was excited about it. I thought it would be pretty good. And the author is non-binary, if I recall correctly, and I want to say triracial too. So obviously the author has like experience. It's basically about a trans guy who runs a Tumblr blog of basically made up user-submitted stories about trans meet-cutes. How people like met their boyfriend and it's like, now we're so happy, like hope for the trans people reading the blog. But Noah, our main character, like makes up all these stories. And he obviously doesn't want that secret to get out because then people will go, well, this is all a big lie. Now I have no hope. And I love that idea. But then somehow it gets revealed that his stories are fake. And suddenly it turns into this, now I have to like do something to like keep people feeling that hope. So he gets this kind of like fake relationship with a guy that he actually likes just to have something to keep posting and to show people like, okay, yeah, sure, my stories were fake, but like I actually am trans and happy with this guy. But again, it's fake. And Noah just like, as I was reading, Noah kind of started getting on my nerves. And I've read a lot of reviews that kind of agree with me that like Noah is just like a pretty annoying main character, which is like fine. It's fine to have an annoying main character. But like Noah is just like so moody and like starts drama over seemingly nothing. And it bugs me to read. I'm like, dude, just communicate with people. But like, I would say the representation is done very well. There's a character who like changes their pronouns in the middle of the story, and it's always handled like very well by almost every character. I think one character makes a mistake, but then they like immediately correct themselves. The way that stuff is done is maybe not realistic, but it can definitely be like inspiring. I think I went into it wanting something that was more wholesome and less dramatic, and that's not what I got. Maybe if you go into it expecting the drama, maybe you'll like it. So I'll warn you, there's some drama. But there are definitely other wholesome moments as well. I mean, I liked it enough. What's historical? Oh, yeah, I guess Miss Peregrine's is a little bit historical fiction because the children are like from like the early 1900s. Yeah, I'm not normally a big historical fiction person. Oh man, I never came back to Brave New World. So my one classic that I read this year was Brave New World. So like I said, I think one of the main reasons that I enjoyed this book more than I expected is because it's sci-fi. It's kind of a dystopian future, like what would it look like if the government basically deeply conditioned us and even genetically modified us to do what they wanted us to do. So like they kind of genetically modify an upper class, a working class, and they like condition people to like never question anything. I love being a worker drone. It's the best. Those other people are so pretentious. And we follow basically one man who sort of questions the way things are in this society. And he goes to the Savage Reservation. This is written in like the 1920s. And if you're uncomfortable with that language, I do not blame you. Just a warning that the word savage is in there a lot. But he kind of makes friends with this, well, he's a white guy, but he was raised on the reservation by a woman who had left this idyllic dystopian community. And basically, the woman who had left the community and her son, who throughout the book is just referred to as the Savage, go back to the dystopian world. My camera died. I cannot do reading vlogs because I just like talk so much. But anyway, Brave New World, really, really good. I think as far as classics go, it's like one of the most engaging classics that I've read. Is there offensive, dated language and like definitely stereotypes and just like some problematic stuff? Yeah. But the overall ideas I think are really, really interesting. I'm sorry, I'm like looking at my phone now, so I can't like actually see the stats in front of me. But yeah, it looks like my best reading months were April and May, which makes sense. I feel like I'm always pretty good about reading. And by the way, I think like because I plugged this data in later, it might be a little bit off. I feel like it was more like May and June. Because my best reading months are almost always in summer and like at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, I feel very motivated. Like I think I'm gonna have read 3 books this month. So for me, a good reading month is 3 books, which is not fantastic, obviously. But yeah, it's interesting to see like, oh yeah, like summer is definitely the best reading time for me. And then also, this didn't really show up on my story graph, but I think in general, like early or like midwinter is also, I guess extreme temperatures make me want to read. I don't know. Okay, so because my camera died and I've been recording for so long, I think I'm going to stop. I wound up doing the entire 2.5 hours that I was supposed to be out of the house. I've just been talking about books for the entire 2.5 hours. Yeah, I wouldn't say I was like particularly surprised by anything that came up on my story graph, but I would say it was cool to see like how much nonfiction I read this year. That's something that I wouldn't say like I feel the need to read more nonfiction. People who read a lot of nonfiction, sometimes I feel like they can get a little pretentious about it, but like I don't feel like, oh yeah, I need to read nonfiction so I'll be like so enlightened, right? Like if you like fiction, friggin' read fiction. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It was really interesting to see that like such a big portion of the books that I read are considered reflective because, again, like when I think of reflective, I kind of just imagine nonfiction, but I guess a lot of the fiction books that I read also could fall under that category. And then adventurous as well. Adventurous makes me think of like Lord of the Rings, grand fantasy, but I guess I have read quite a few things that could be considered adventurous. But yeah, overall, I feel like it just kind of like confirmed things that I knew about what I was reading, but it's interesting to see it written down statistically. So I enjoyed this experience and I hope you did too. I'm also just happy that I met my reading goal this year. This is the most books that I've read in a year. Again, I know it's not like that much, but I am proud of myself for actually reading 20 books in a year, which is something that I've been trying to do for so long. But yeah, I'm curious about you guys. What kind of books did you read this year? Whether you read, like 1 or 2 books or like 50 books, what were some of the books that you guys enjoyed? Let me know in the comments. I have a never-ending TBR, but I always like to learn about new books. And other than that, thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I put videos out every other Friday about music, media, linguistics, and whatever else is on my mind that week. Thanks so much for watching. See ya.